Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This is My name is Wijayanto. I am the director of Center for Media and Democracy LPDIS, and also the director of Department of Government Science program in Diponegoro University. And I'm honored to be to host our discussion. And this discussion is the panel 4B of the second day of Authori conference. And with us, we already have Professor Astrid Nora Nielsen from Lund University that who will chair the discussion for how long? Is it Astrid? Is it okay for 2 hours?
Right, yes, that would be fine. Yes, I think we had said 1 hour and a half, but for me, 2 hours is fine, so we can extend it.
Wonderful. So if necessary, we can extend it to 2 hours. Now, Astrid, the screen is yours.
Right, thank you very much, Vijay. So I'll have another go. I started, did some presenting on my own here, but I'll try again. Try better. So thank you very much, Wijayanto, and I would also like to wish everyone very warmly welcome to this panel, which is entitled Political Participation, the Geometry of Participation in the Face of Neoliberal Influenced Authoritarianism in Southeast Asia, that I have the very great pleasure of chairing. And so my name is Astrid Nora Nielsen, and I am a senior lecturer at Lund University in Sweden. So this session will comprise three presentations of rather different topics, which, however, all from their different vantage points focus on the strategies that have been developed by civil society to make their voice heard in the context of increasing governmental authoritarianism, biopolitical disposals, and even technological terror. So civil groups, they react by a variety of actions, which include fostering alliances, mobilizing diaspora networks, and petitioning and online action. So questions that these papers ask thus include, with the renewal of government authoritarian strategies, how do the governed social groups adapt the tactics, objectives, and their modes of action? And to what extent may these tactics transform state institutions? And lastly, can, and if so, how, governmental technologies be hijacked to become tools even for social emancipation? So we have three presenters with us here today. And the first is Siti Astia Masran from the University of Malaya with a paper entitled The Global Bursi Movement, Politics and Belonging Among Malaysian Diaspora Abroad. So Siti Astia Binti Masran is currently a PhD student at the Department of International and Strategic Studies at the University of Malaya. And she has been interested in social sciences, especially in human rights and migration studies, since her bachelor's degree, during which she looked at Malaysia's policy towards refugees. And her interest in this field has evolved to focus on Malaysian migration, especially among the professional diaspora. And this has motivated her to pursue a PhD degree on migration issues among Malaysians. Our second presenter is Wijayanto with a paper entitled Cyber Terror, Academic Alliance on Anti-Corruption and Indonesian Democratic Regression. And you introduced yourself very briefly, but let me expand a little bit then. So Wijayanto is the director of the Center for Media and Democracy at the Institute of Research, Education and Information of Economy and Social Sciences, and a lecturer in media and democracy at Diponegoro University. And he obtained his PhD degree from Leiden University in 2019 with a thesis on the biography of Kompas, the oldest and most influential daily newspaper in Indonesia. And for the last 12 years, he has been working on issues related to journalism, media freedom, corruption, elections, social movements, and democracy in Indonesia. And our last presenter today is Yuyun Vayuningrum from the University of Rotterdam with a presentation on entitled Contesting the State in the Time of the Pandemic, Trajectories of Civil Society in Southeast Asia. And so Yuyun Vayuningrum is the representative of Indonesia to the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights since 2019. And she obtained her master's degree in human rights from Maidol University in Thailand in 2007, and is currently pursuing a PhD at the International Institute of Social Studies of the Erasmus University of Rotterdam. And her research deals with the various state engagements with international human rights norms in the context of ASEAN regionalism. So with that, I will hand this back to Wijayanto to play to you the video recordings with the presentations that the presenters have prepared on beforehand.
Thank you, Astrid. I will be assisted by our colleague from LPDAS here, Elsie Tra, who will play the videos. Please.
All right, I will play the video. Wait a bit.
In this time, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wijayanto. In this time, I will present my work on the cyber terror on academics, Alliance on Anti-Corruption in Indonesia. Please allow me to share my screen. So as you can see there, the title of my presentation is Cyber Terror Academic Alliance on Anti-Corruption and Democratic Regression in Indonesia. So in 2019, September 2019, there was a plan from Indonesian government, the legislative and the executive, to revise the bills on the revision on the National Corruption on National Commission on Corruption and Eradication. The revision of the bills will seriously weaken the Anti-Corruption Commission. That was why there was a huge protest from the activists, from Indonesian citizens, to reject the bills. This is because the National Commission on Corruption Eradication, or what we call as KPK, is a very credible institution that people hope to be able to eradicate the massive practices of corruption by Indonesian elites in Indonesia. As you could see here, the survey from ISIAS, for instance, saying that Corruption Eradication Commission was trusted by 83.1% of the Indonesian public, while the House of Representatives, in another hand, also political parties, were only trusted by 45.8 and 55.4% of the Indonesian public. So the last trusted institution was planning to revise to weaken the more trusted institution. That was why there was a huge protest.
Elsie, could you please pause it for a while? Else?
What?
Pause sebentar ya. There are some colleagues here that only see black screen. Astrid, can you see the screen, the presentation?
I can see perfectly.
It's quite it's quite strange, yeah, because some people can see it very clear and some
from Jakarta, I think Pradipa also clear.
Yeah. Yeah. Erlambang, Pradipa. What if but still, can we give it another try else for the share? Is it okay, Astrid?
Yes, sure.
Yeah. Stop your screen, stop screen, and then share it again.
All right. Wait. Wait. Okay. Already optimize. Share song. Udah. Is it clear?
Yes, clear.
Yes, yes.
What about Siti and Andar? Are you okay? Because the one who have problem is Siti and Andar, and Siti is one of our presenters.
I still can't see anything.
Oh, why?
No.
Yeah. What about you, Andar? Is it okay now with you? Still the black. Okay then, but we can hear the voice, yeah. But could you hear
Yes, the voice is clear. Only the screen.
The voice is clear. Just one, please.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. So is it okay if we just continue? Perhaps you can watch the if you want to, you can watch the YouTube as well of this presentation. Yeah.
So we will continue this.
Okay. Yes, please, Else. Yeah.
Right.
2018, there was a huge number of corruption practices by the mayors in Indonesia. You could see the statistic there. And the protests also came from the academics who also reject the plan for the revision. Like you can see here on the news dated in 9 September, thousands of academics rejected the revision. This is one of the pictures of what happened in my own university, the Ponorogo University, in which me and other friends were rejecting the revision as well. It was reported by the Kompas daily newspaper in Indonesia, Kompas.id, in 9 September 2019. However, there was then cyber terror to the academics who rejected the revision. Here we come to the research questions of my work, which are, first of all, how did internet or social media, WhatsApp groups in this regard, empower the academic alliance on anti-corruption? Secondly, how did the cyber terror weaken the alliance? And lastly, what does this terror mean for Indonesian democracy? The method used for the research were in-depth interview with the 16 victims of cyber terror. They were all academics in social media analysis and digital ethnography. So first, I would like to explain to you the National Academic Alliance Against Corruption. So this academic alliance, they actually organized their protests by using WhatsApp. So there's a WhatsApp groups entitled a National Academic Alliance, in which the members were the coordinators of the movement in their universities. So, or the representative of its universities in Indonesia. In this WhatsApp group, they write together petition, and they updated the number of lecturers, academics who signed the petition to refuse the rejection. In 9 September, for instance, it became news in Indonesian mainstream media. It says, Mr. Presiden Jokowi, more than 1,000 of lecturers from Gajah Mada University to Indonesian University rejected the revision. And as you could see in the picture here, this academic alliance increased so fast. Yeah, the member included all of the universities in all of the Indonesian islands. For your information, Indonesia consisted of 17,000 islands with 5 big islands. And in each of those islands, there are universities, and there were already 41 universities, 22 from 22 provinces, consisted of more than 2,500 lecturers that joined the petition in around 2 weeks. So the movement was strengthened very fast through the medium of WhatsApp groups as a social media. However, there it came cyber terror. First of all, I would like to make clear here that what I mean by cyber terror is referring to Louis 2014, which is the deliberate act or threat with illegal actions, either by a single person or in conspiracy against the integrity, confidentiality, and/or availability of information and of information processing systems and networks, leading to one or more of the following consequences. First, the suffering, serious injuries or death of people. Second, serious psychological effects to people and the population. Third, serious societal disruptive economic loss. 4, serious threats of ecological safety. And 5, serious threats of the social and political stability and cohesion. And here I show you the results of my digital ethnography. I want to show you the situation after the members and the coordinator of the group were hijacked. So as you could see here, what the form of the terror was phone calls from foreign numbers to the members of the WhatsApp groups. As you could see here, the number from the UK, from the United States. It could be fake number. However, it really happened and impact the psychology of the groups. Here is the example, the portrait of the WhatsApp of the coordinator of this WhatsApp group, in which he suddenly revealed his support to the revision and sent a personal message to every member of the groups that is supporting the revision, the plan for the revision. And the fact that the coordinator of the groups were already hijacked, the WhatsApp account already hijacked, and also the lots of phone calls from foreign number has made the member of the group left the WhatsApp group. So they asked for permission. I got hacked. Please let me left the group. That's what the member said. And this is the result of the interview. Yeah. For instance, one of the informants said that I feel only the pressure I feel is being monitored like that. What kind of action are there? What kind of discourse that I share seem to stick around? A phenomenon later, said the second informant, becomes a trend, and then maybe it can develop, which I call a part of terrorism in the social media level. Terrorism in this context is doxing, and this is very terrible to me, being humiliated in public, whether it is true or not, and after that, the destructive effect occurs. The person concerned finds it challenging to clarify and so on. So he feared that, after his account was hijacked and then it was used, for instance, to expose something humiliating that can be humiliating for him. And once it was viral, then it's almost impossible to clarify. And he really feared about it. And it also significantly disturbed the coordination, the alliance, the movement. like the information, the interview transcript from the informant number 7, he said, during that time, it was personally constant, and some calls did interfere with my communication. I was also got disturbed as I kept getting the phone call. We did not use the phone, only WhatsApp. They were hijacked, author added. We could not answer any call because we were afraid. We were reminded not to pick up because if we pick up, then our number could be taken over and remoted from one direction. That was scary too. And said informant 11, which happened to be one of the leader of the anti-corruption organization in Indonesia, he said it becomes a bit more difficult. For example, Thursday press conference at 9 to 12. From 9 to 12, the calls do not stop. Get on the phone, do not pick up, come back in, do not pick up, keep going. So how could you make a coordination with your friends if you're a leader of organization, if your phone was continuously called by someone else, by somebody? And in fact, in 16th September, as I explained to you before, the movement had influenced the coverage of the media. However, as the movement of the academics were weakening, yeah, and it also had less influence to the media. That was why, to some extent, I argue that it impacted, for instance, the result of the survey by Kompas Daily newspaper, one of the biggest newspaper in Indonesia, that said that based on their survey after the terror was weakened, the alliance was weakened, that most of the public turned out to be agree with the revision, 44.9%. It's it's around 5% higher than those who disagree with the revision, 39.9%. So you could see here that it really impacted the movement and then the media coverage. And it actually reminded me to the finding of the research, for instance, by FIDEM, that actually the civil society increasingly reject the attempt of a democratic regulation, but the democratic regulation itself is also worsening. One of the indicators, before we go there, sorry. In Indonesia, democratic regulation has been a trend, as pointed out by so many studies, from Marcus Mitsner, Aspinall, Power, Aminuddin, Wiratraman, Wijayanto, myself, with lead to lots of many kinds of terms: effective democracy, regression, setbacks, decline, backsliding, illiberal democracy, neo-authoritarianism, authoritarian innovation, authoritarian practices. And one of the main indicators of the regression was actually the erosion of civil liberties. Like the survey from the Economics Intelligence Unit in 2019, for instance, it says that Indonesia score of civil liberties is 5.59, which is not good, not a happy news. And it remains the same in 2020, in which the score is more or less the same, 5.59. The survey from the LP3IS, the institution in which I work as well, it revealed that actually when the respondent asked whether or not they agree that the citizens now scared of expressing their opinions, to unite and to make an organization to express themselves, more than 35% agree, and more than 16% strongly agree. So you can see here that more than 50% of the Indonesian public, they feel the fear to express themselves. So the terror has the democratic regulation in Indonesia becomes worse. So the conclusion of my presentation would be, first of all, social media in this regard, WhatsApp groups had become a medium for the movement against the weakening of the anti-corruption body by revising the law in the case of the Anti-Corruption Academic Alliance to initiate and enlarge the alliance very quickly across islands, across the universities as well. However, the cyber terror that befell them significantly weakened the anti-corruption movement by academics in Indonesia. It had a psychological impact, disrupted coordination, and reduced the influence of the movement. And this finding strengthens the findings of other scholars about the blurry portrait of democratic situation in Indonesia, which continues to decline along with the narrowing of civil liberties and the increasingly limited space for pro-democracy activists. I will end my presentation here. Thank you so much for your attention.
Next video, else.
All right. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute.
In Malaysia. So first of all, I would like to thank Authori committee for allowing me to present on this platform. My presentation today would be the global Bersih movement, politics and belonging among Malaysian diaspora abroad. Just a background story. During my master, I did my dissertation on Malaysia brethren in Korea, so I focus on push and pull factors of the migration. What interesting was most of the interviewees I had said that they move because they don't feel like being home in Malaysia, so they have to struggle mainly because of the landscape in Malaysian politics, which pretty much affecting the economy and social structure in this country. However, they said that living abroad makes them more aware of Malaysia's situation and develop more attachment towards Malaysia. So they want to see and do something to make Malaysia better. I started to wonder if that is the case for the diaspora in other countries. So I dug in more into it, and true enough, the more I look for the response, the more I noticed that the experiences and knowledge obtained while living abroad have encouraged the overseas Malaysian community to cultivate interest and awareness of political developments at home, and this diaspora community actively supporting Malaysian civil society's work at home to strengthen Malaysia maturing democracy, which resulting in the forming of global Bersih. So, for this presentation, I will focus on the relationship and contribution of social movement, which is global Bersih, and sense of belonging among diaspora in bringing social change. Before I begin, I will first introduce you to Malaysia so that you have a foundation to understand about this presentation. So, Malaysia is made up of two major segments, Peninsular Malaysia and Sabah and Sarawak. And prior to independence and establishment of Malaysia, this country has been colonized by Portugal, uh, Dutch, Japan, and British. And the colonization period has resulting in the unique feature of Malaysian society, which is multicultural, and also the born of race classification, Bumiputra and non-Bumiputra. So the word Bumiputra literally means son of land, and this term was used to describe the preference of Malays and other native races in Malaysian politics, which listed in Article 160 and 161 of our federal constitution. Other Malaysian population which are not included in the list are called non-Bumiputra. In terms of politics, many scholars view Malaysia as having a hybrid character, which combination of both democratic values and authoritarian feature. It displays some elements of democratic legitimacy, most commonly by holding regular periodic election, but also in the meantime, it places various types of democratic deficits under tight rules, including manipulation and repression, which further blur the line between party and state. So during 2018 general elections, Malaysia ruling government was led by the National Front (BN), and the biggest opposition was the Alliance of Hope (PH), followed by the Malaysian Islamic Party (PAS) and other parties. So I created this slide to show you how the segregation happened in Malaysia. I won't discuss in detail here, but as you can see on the screen, since the colonization period, the divide and rule policy was used to divide the community based on their ethnicity, and this segregation continued until now due to Malaysia's national plan, which created to improve Malaysia's condition, but ended up causing many social conflicts in the community. All right, moving forward, let's continue with in-depth discussion of this presentation, where I discuss more on the notion of belonging. So what is belonging? Belonging means acceptance as a member or part. It's really simple. It's a really simple word, but a huge concept. It's a human need, just like our need for food and shelter. But unfortunately, the notion of belonging is very much connected with the elements of exclusions and discrimination. And this is what most of us try to fight against. And this is where the social movement works magnificently as a platform to make changes and as a place to belong to. So for this presentation, I divided the discussion into three sections. So first section is belonging in question. So as I mentioned in previous slides, the national plan plays a huge role in the non-Bumiputra discontentment. Well, we cannot run from the concept of Bumiputra and non-Bumiputra classification if you want to talk about the sense of belonging in Malaysia. There is a study in which to assess patriotism and loyalty of Malaysian students abroad, which reported that non-Bumiputra students feel threatened by Malaysian politics and exposed that they did not feel accepted as part of the society, which in the end jeopardized their sense of belonging. It's really sad reality because people already questioning their sense of belonging at young age, and it won't be so surprising to see that these people accounts for the number of Malaysian diaspora abroad. So based on the World Bank survey, as you can see on the screen, which done among diaspora, it shows 87% of them believe that if we pay attention on the race-based policy, we might be able to attract back the diaspora. However, it is not an easy option because Bumiputrism has become a convenient tool for the ruling class to maintain its powers, and for the opposition side to gain favor from those who are not happy with the classification. So I take a few news in 2018 general election. As an example, you can see on the screen, where leaders of political parties and candidates of the general elections were found to have promoted feelings of ill will between different races. So, the foundation of non-Malays' negative attitude towards the government is apparently linked to the use of ethnic belongingness to maintain loyalties among the supporters of both sides in this ongoing political polarization. Alright, move to the second section, belonging in construction. So similar to what I've been mentioned in introduction earlier, according to Rashida Mahmad in 2014, the experience of living abroad and observing different culture have positive links to the growing of awareness on values and identity among majority of Bumiputera and also non-Bumiputera respondents, which she relates the concept of constructive patriotism. Okay, assuming that diaspora are all political aware might be an overstatement, but this diaspora obviously has better chance and option in being conversant about their home country politics, of course alongside their education attainment. They are more of they are more aware of their rights, which medium could be used to channel their voice, and the action they could take. And that might answer why the steering community for social movement groups are mostly coming from those with better education background. As Yolanda, one of the diaspora, said, it is our right to demand it, and we should expect no less. It shows how awareness in herself. So let's see how powerful an instrumental social movement group has been for political inclusion among Malaysians. If you want to talk about social movement group in Malaysia, we definitely need to mention Bersih. So Bersih movement was a community movement that non-partisan Malaysian citizens drove to campaign for clean and fair election in the country. So the first election, the first rally started in 2007, and it received positive response and led up to its second rally, which also gained attention from the concerned Malaysian diaspora abroad and also international media. So the support from beyond Malaysia has been demonstrated by the parallel movement that has become known as Global Bersih. So the Global Bersih is an ad hoc international movement without a formal structure, but exists in order to demonstrate support for electoral reform. So they consist of Malaysians around the world who still have strong roots and sense of attachment to their place of birth. They do feel guilty for living abroad and try to redeem this feeling of abandoning the country with action, which manifested through their involvement in political movements, political advocacy, and other transnational political activities to show their Malaysianness and contribute to the country. Lastly, let's look at belonging in actions. So on 9th of May 2018, history has made in Malaysia when the one party Malay dominated national politics tradition has come to an end. So these changes happen because of combination of many things. So Mahathir factors, corruption issues, cost of living problems, dissatisfaction, and so on and so forth. And this turnover might not be as surprising as we thought if we track back the intense participation of Malaysians in the elections, especially in the growing involvement of Malaysian diaspora abroad. So, as I mentioned before, Brazil started in 2006 and 2007 and it was actually resulting in the shifting of voters' orientation, as you can see in the 2008 general election compared to 2004. And Global Bersih formed in 2011, which fought for the postal ballot system reformation so that postal votes can be also casted by Malaysian abroad. And thanks to the pressure, Malaysian overseas allowed to cast their postal votes starting in 2030. And of course, the election result pattern continued changing until the winning of opposition party in 2018. So also you can also see that the turnout rate for general election 13 and 14 show relatively high percent as compared to the three other general election before per se, global per se, and overseas vote uh, allowed. So it shows that 2018 changes is not an overnight phenomenon, but an accumulation of grievances and opportunities which accumulated following the earlier election. And of course, this only happened with the help of social media, which is a main tool used by many social movements. And in the 2018 election, Malaysians who live abroad use this platform to express their mind. So Facebook groups like My Overseas Vote was created to share their opinions on the election alongside the funding for election travel and also viral campaign Jom Balik Undi, Come Home to Vote, to motivate Malaysian abroad to by any means cast their vote in the election. So how this diaspora organized this gathering highlights two key defining aspects of the Persib movement. One, the movement widespread success in leveraging social media to mobilize supporters, and two, the extent to which support for the movement transcended both geographical boundaries and societal demographics, such as race and religions. Alright, so just to recap, my paper is discussing on the first, the racial issue in Malaysia, which leads to losing sense of belonging and drive people away. Second, the awareness and knowledge gained abroad improve the sense of belonging and channel through participation which channel through participation in global Bursi movement, and lastly, seeing the political participation among diaspora abroad in general election, especially general election 2018, which proves their sense of belonging and loyalty towards Malaysia, and also bringing in social changes. And throughout this, my discussion, I also mentioned the power of social media because since the advancement in technology, it helps the migrating process easier, and it also become the means for social movement organization to cultivate the belongingness among diaspora. So that's all for now. Thank you for listening. Bye bye.
So we go to the next video, El Citra.
All right, wait a minute.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are. My name is Yuyun Wahiningrum. I'm very happy to be in this Authori online conference, 7th to 10 July 2021, and this is panel 4A, Political Participation. My paper is entitled Contesting the State in the Time of Pandemic, Trajectories of Civil Society in Southeast Asia. I would like to first start it with presenting to you the research problem and objective. Countries have different responses to address the pandemic, such as physical distancing policies, movement control, lockdowns, curfews, quarantine, and state of emergency. My research question is how have the nature of coronavirus and the ways Southeast Asian government responded to the pandemic reshaped the relations between the state and civil society. The objectives of this research are to assess the changing forms of state and civil society relationship in the time of pandemic, especially on the area of autonomy, participation, partnership, and solidarity. And second objective of this study is to investigate if the shifting relations contribute to civil society strategies choices, tactics, objectives, and modes of action to engage the state during the pandemic. Information for this research or data that gathered for this research come from media coverage and literature and recorded online seminars. For this draft, I have not been able to interview the key actors, but I will do later. My initial argument for this paper is that pandemic has reshaped the complex relations between state and society. Despite all restriction through several legal and on civil liberties, there has been an increased social engagement in the context of health crisis responses. There are 7 trends that emerge from these responses as I have observed in the last 1 year. First, using public health crisis to reason the tougher restriction on civil space, activities, and organizations. Second, legalized restriction on civil liberties. The third, despite restriction, street protests remain with some conditions. Fourth, challenging narratives and disinformation about pandemic. And then fifth, new negotiated space and initiatives for humanitarian responses. Sixth, expanding and repurpose advocacy group to address welfare issues. And seventh, community participation on organized relief efforts. These are the 7 trends that I observe from the responses of the state or governments in the last 1 year um, in Southeast Asia. I would like to go one by one quickly. First, on using a health crisis to reason the tougher restriction on civil space, activities, and organizations. Restriction on meetings between civil society organizations and parliaments on the ground of health protection has been repetitively mentioned in number of media and news media. And this restriction impacted the enjoyment of freedom of movement, expression, opinion, peaceful assembly, religion, access to information, the right to health, work, education, and privacy, including press freedom, right to food, housing, and personal security, which have limited civil society advocacy for fundamental rights, reinforcing a trend that exists before the pandemic. These restrictions also silence civic and democratic criticism of government's pandemic responses and move social and political activism from offline to online. Second, on the legalized restriction on civil liberties, for instance through imposing state of emergency law, as well as laws on fake news that has been used to crack down on government critics, press charges against online critics of government's crisis management, charge anti-government protesters, go after opponents, circumvent parliamentary check on executive power, and limit the public backlash against allegation of government's involvement in human rights violations, including the forced disappearance of an exiled activist who, who was critical to the government. On the third observation, despite restriction, street protests remain with condition. In Thailand, for instance, young people leading nationwide protests against the regime since March 2020. The demand has been varied from demanding the prime minister resignation and demanding democratic reform, as well as demanding the reform in the monarchy. These kind of protests also happen in the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Myanmar, with different scale of protests. The fourth observation is that civil society challenged the narrative and work on disinformation about pandemic, challenging disinformation about pandemic, as has been seen in Philippines, Malaysia, as well as Indonesia, by providing fact-checking information on the pandemic and hold governments accountable during the crisis. The fifth observation is that there has been a new negotiated spaces and initiatives for humanitarian responses. So, for instance, in Malaysia, the movement control order barred civil society or organization or NGOs to distribute humanitarian assistance to those who need the support, such as migrants, refugees, refugee population. But after NGOs launched a campaign called Let Us Work With You, the government adjusted the order to allow NGOs to distribute food and other emergency supplies to affected communities. This is also found in Indonesia, Philippines, as well as in Thailand. The sixth observation is that expanding the and repurpose advocacy groups to address the welfare issues. Many groups that not addressing the issue of humanitarian crisis have been taken responsibility to do some welfare issues, such as we can find it in Thailand, in Myanmar, and Philippines, Singapore, Indonesia, and Cambodia. In Thailand, for instance, student activists who launched anti-junta campaigns before the pandemic have partly shifted to humanitarian work by distributing food packs to the unemployed, dwellers, and affected sex workers. In Myanmar, some ethnic minority activists have reoriented themselves from human rights campaigns to health advocacy and service provision, including by distributing food and other basic goods in remote areas. In the Philippines, human rights groups have reshaped human rights discourses in terms of people working together out of generosity to achieve a common goals and a shared sense of identity and treating others with respect and dignity. In Singapore, Pink Dot, the LGBT movement that campaigned for recognition and equality, has extended its support to migrant workers by raising funds for and delivering care packages to many of those who were trapped in their dormitories because of coronavirus restriction. Similar initiative also found in Indonesia as well as in Cambodia. The seventh observation uh, in last year in responding to coronavirus, there has been community participation on organized relief efforts. In Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam, charity groups were set up to raise funds to buy medical supplies and food for slum dwellers, disabled people, and also to migrant workers. In Indonesia, for instance, tech startup launch crowdfunding campaigns to raise funds for informal sector workers to buy personal protective equipment or PPE for healthcare workers. Similarly, in Myanmar, NGOs as well as religious organizations and local companies have provided food and other emergency supplies for the needy, filling gaps left by the state. Some religious worship places also allow the religious compound to be used as quarantine centers. In the Philippines, citizens have come together to make PPE for frontline health professionals, distributed food packs for the homeless, and made cash transfers to the unemployed. In Cambodia, civil society organization and business tycoon have made donations to support the government efforts and counter coronavirus. So with these initial observations, this paper would like to argue that despite the fact that all restrictions imposed for civil society and society in general, there has been a number of increased social engagement in the context of health crisis responses. Thank you very much.
Right, so thank you very much to all presenters for these three thought-provoking presentations indeed. And we are going to proceed to the Q&A. So please, you're going to be able to write your questions in the chat box. We seem to have lost one of our presenters, Yuyun Vayuningrum, who you just heard. Unless you are here under a different name, then please say so. Yeah, it seems not, but we do hope that she will be back. But for now, please just direct your questions to either Vijayanto or to Siti Asdia. And I think that Vijayanto, you have some further instructions on how to use the chat box.
Yes, actually we already informed the participants since the beginning to write anything if they want to write a question. So it's feel free because it's opened. Yeah.
Right. So while you do that, I thought I'd take the liberty to kick this off by asking some questions of my own. So maybe I'll start by asking you then, Vijayanto. So thank you for this insight of you really of living through this cyber terror. And your presentation made me return to the original questions of the panel. So the first one of those it read, with the renewal of government authoritarian strategies, how do governed social groups adapt their tactics, their objectives, and their modes of action? So that is there a continuation to this very sad and sobering narrative that you have shared with us? Can you see further action in any form after this cyber terror, any adaptation either of the tactics or the modes of action? And could I also ask, whilst I'm at it, so in this context, do you think it's even relevant to consider the last question that was proposed originally by this panel? How can governmental technologies be hijacked and become tools for social emancipation? Or do you think that this is a too utopian question to ask in this context?
Well, that's lots of questions, yeah? Remind me to the day of my defense day, yeah? During my PhD. Thank you. It's a lot of questions. I will answer like how anthropologists answer questions, yeah, by telling story. As you can see in my presentation, yeah, there was a huge terror, actually, cyber terror to be sure, and I already explained many kinds of forms, and I would like to say here that that's not the first, and that's not the last one. Before, the kind of cyber terror already practiced to some activists in various issues, but the case that I presented, the revision of the KPK law, is I guess the biggest ones, yeah, because it was targeted to a lot of academics who live in different cities, not only in different cities but also different provinces, and not only different provinces but also different islands at the same times. So we were wondering that, or not just wondering, yeah, but during my interviews with the victims, yeah, of the cyber terrors, they believe that whoever did this, they used very sophisticated, yeah, tools, and some of them even believe that the tools that are used for the terrors, to hijack your WhatsApp, it's not easy. Not everyone can hijack your WhatsApp, and also can could call you from a different number, foreign numbers, and they believe that in order to do this, it needs a tool that even more sophisticated than the tool that is owned by the KPK. KPK is the Indonesian anti-corruption body. This institution has a certain tool to hijack or to monitor the conversation or the use of the phone call, of the targeted corruptors or alleged corruptors, the popular term for this is OTT, operasi tangkap tangan. It means that the corruptors are caught as they are doing their operation. But my informants believe that the tool that is used to hijack the WhatsApp or to monitor the activists are more sophisticated and also more expensive. So we today face that kind of regimes, that is not clear who they are. We don't know their face, but they are exist. But we know for sure that this is a very powerful groups or people. They are rich because the tool is very expensive, and they have lots of networks because this kind of machine. Some say that this is Pegasus. Pegasus is the tool that is produced by the Russia, I guess, or Israel, I don't know. The Israel, the military, and the not Indonesian military, but the military bodies from other countries that is already sophisticated in some of their or in improving their weapons. So these parties must have a relation with must have a global relation as well. So this is not ordinary people who hijack your number in order to, in Indonesia there is a WhatsApp saying "Mama minta pulsa." Sometimes you get a text from a random person saying that this is from your mom, and your mom is in the police office, and please send me credit for my cell phone because I need to call somebody. So it's not the kind of criminal that that they hijack your number in order to get credit for your phone. It's not for that, and they don't ask you. They don't ask you your money. They don't ask anything. They only want you to stop doing your activism. That's clear. The motive is clear. So you can say that this is how the in my paper I argue that this is an oligarchic, it's a corrupt oligarchic parties or corrupt oligarchic elites who are very they use the very sophisticated tool that comes together with the digital revolution to stop the movement that is also being facilitated by the technology as well. As I presented in my presentation, those thousands of academics, they could gather, they could build the alliance very very fast using the facilitation of a WhatsApp group. But that's how the movement, I will say, end or failed as well, because it is exactly the technology that is used to suppress the movement from the shadow shadow power, and also so that will be the beginning, but it didn't stop there, because the kind of terror was then practiced repeatedly for the movements that came after the 2019. But we can say that this is just when there is a protest to a problematic policy. In 2020, we have so-called omnibus law. This is the the law about that is created by the government to promote economic growth. However, this law is problematic because it undermines the rights of the workers. It undermines the environmental sustainability. It undermines the civil rights. So there were a lot of protests, and the protesters were again terrored using the digital terror. And lastly, in 2021, recently, there were two cases. The one case was digital terror practiced towards the Indonesian Corruption Watch activists, who they were protesting the recent policy that we call it the test to the officials of the KPK, of the anti-corruption body, who are good at their works, meaning they sent some politician to jail, but then using this test, those officers were declared as not qualified, and they were fired. So the Indonesian Corruption Watch activists protested this, and they also got the same, like what the activists got in 2019, cyber terrors, the hijack of their social media, and so on. And the last one was happening to a watchdog activist who played a movie about the title is The End Game, protesting the recent policy to fire those KPK officers. So it happened again and again, and we could say that this technology is used against democracy, is used against the activism. So it's like instead of utopia, this is dystopia that is happening right now. Perhaps that would be. I don't know whether I answers your questions. So that would be the story. Yeah.
I think you're saying in very clear terms that the technology is not on the side of the protesters. They simply lack the technological, the economic affordances needed to fight this. But how about the innovation of tactics then? Can you see any response emerging to this cyber terror? Any way forward really for dissent when met cyber terror?
I think the innovation goes in favor of the oligarchic elites. I'm afraid. So they did innovate in their way to control the publics. I guess this form of control or surveillance didn't happen in the New Order era, for instance. Some of Indonesians said that we come back to the New Order period. Yes, but also no. The other period, the New Order period in which we live under authoritarian President Suharto, there was no such a thing as controlling what you did in the internet, right? Because the internet was not there yet, I guess, as well. So in a way, it's the innovation, innovation, or perhaps some scholar said. Authoritarian innovation. However, I will not say, but it's in a different understanding. This is innovation in controlling or in surveilling to do surveillance to the citizens. That what happens. And in my research, I guess it's from that project, I can say that there's also actually resistance, toward this terror. From civil society activists, there are some initiatives like from SafeNet, that try to protect the digital rights of the citizens, and also from LP3ES, LP3ES institution where I work. So we did seminars and also discussion to bring literacy to the public and also to criticize this kind of practice. However, I must say that so far we haven't really succeeded to conquer or to curb this kind of terror, this kind of practice. This method is used again and again whenever there was a critic, strong critic from the social civil society activists towards problematic policies, and still happening right now.
Thank you very much for that, Vijayanto. And I can see that there are questions popping in here. I had another question I would like to ask Siti Astia, and then I'll move on to the questions in the chat box. But Siti Astia, I found your analysis of the diaspora going abroad for having lost the sense of belonging and then reconnecting with the homeland through their experiences abroad. That was to me particularly compelling. And to me, that also invoked Benedict Anderson's idea in the Spectre of Comparisons, in which he also points to this double gaze, as he calls it, as the origin of nationalism. So nationalism is born out of these comparisons, matching one's own nations against others. So I thought this is a really interesting argument that you're onto here. And I was wondering if you could perhaps tell us a bit more about what sources that you have relied on so far and how this paper fits in with your ongoing PhD research, if it does, because it seems also to me like it would be particularly interesting to carry out interviews with diaspora community members to probe into their motivations for joining the global BRC and how this is connected to their sense of national belonging. So is this perhaps something that you have done or something that you would consider doing?
Hello. Can you guys see me?
I cannot see you, but I can hear you.
Okay, I think because of my internet connection is a bit poor, so I've been kicked out a few times. So I have to come in again. Okay, so your question is how is it related to my current study? So actually my current study is about sense of belonging among diaspora, which I look through the transnational political participation. Okay, I think I forgot to open this.
Have you
All right. Okay, so I'm look through the transnational political participation among this diaspora to check on their sense of belonging. So one of the aspect I look, of course, the diaspora participation through social movement activities, which is part of informal participation. So I'm currently focusing only on Australia diaspora. So I'm carrying out surveys and also interviews with
we can't hear you very well. So
Malaysian diaspora and also those other movement abroad. So the political really important because sir, can you hear me?
We can't hear you very well, so perhaps it is a good idea to turn off the video. You could try that. If there's a problem with your connection.
So I think that's why you couldn't see the screen as well, yeah? Perhaps it has something to do with the connection as well.
Siti, are you still there? Siti, are you there?
Hello.
All right. Hi.
Sorry.
Let's try again.
Okay. I think I just stop using the video. Maybe it's better. So So where okay, so my current study is about the diaspora in Australia. So I'm conducting surveys on their sense of belonging, where I use social cohesions theory, which I combine with the transnational political participation theories, because I want to see how this diaspora manifested their sense of belonging through their participation, both in formal and informal participation. So so far, for what I have, I can say that most of them are very eager to voice out their concern about Malaysia. So most of them, they are very happy to give feedback, like showing that they have this sense of belonging, but no one want to hear yet. So global Bersih and Bersih and other social movements, actually they're like opening giving platform for these people to be included and to be heard. So this is what I have, and then I also do some um, digital ethnography, where I go through the blogging of people who stay abroad, because there are a lot of people, Malaysians abroad, who actually um, telling us stories through their blog, through their Facebook, through their Twitter, but it's not really seen because nobody's actually looking into it. So that's what I'm doing right now. And then also, because this is sense of belonging, where which I also mentioned earlier, I have to look into the question of the notion of races in Malaysia, which is very huge a problem in Malaysia. And through this, actually, uh, I I found out that it is discussed very much on our news, but not in the news that related to the government. It's more like opposition's news. Uh, I can name some, which is Free Malaysia Today, for example, and then Malaysia Kini. These channels are not really related to government. This is more to this actually more voicing out people's rakyat. I mean, citizens' voice. So this is what I have right now. So I mentioned again, I'm using surveys. I also interviewing people, and I also do some digital ethnography and also media framing analysis. So it's kind of combining a lot of things, because it's a huge and in Malaysia, because most of the social movement story is more about Malaysian in Malaysia, and student activism, stuff like this, but not Malaysian abroad. So that's what I think, how I can answer your question.
Thank you. It's fascinating. I think we all look forward very much to following this research when it comes out in your PhD also.
Thank
I
you.
see we have Yun Vayuning Room with us now, so that's great. Welcome back to the session. I had a question for you too, but I don't want to monopolize too much this. I see, even though we have added some time now until 12 o'clock, we still should move on. So if there is time, I will ask my question for you later. But I think we should move on to look at the questions in the chat box. So first we have a question from Mary Rasilis. Mary, do you want to ask it yourself, or do you want me to read out the question?
If you want, yeah, since I'm here, let me ask it.
Right.
I know I find, your international migration study very interesting, partly because we have so many Filipinos who are in the same situation, mostly in the United States because of colonial past. And what I wanted to ask you is, do you have any sense of the second generation whose children, Malaysian parents who migrated, and their children are born there, let's say Australia. I don't know if they are considered still Malaysian citizens, but in the Philippine case, the children of native born parents can claim Filipino citizenship even if they're also American. So we have a dual nationality act that was passed 5 or 6 years ago. And I'm just curious of the dynamics of the first generation, which of course is still involved, but where the second generation may lose it, except if they become citizens, if they are still citizens of Malaysia, and I don't know if that's the case, as in the Philippines, would they still continue the belonging and there would be another generation of this global movement? I mean, I'm just thinking of the future, maybe of the young people and Malaysia as having diaspora young people abroad, a next generation. So that was my question.
All right. Thank you for the question. That's for me, right? Okay. So to answer that, first of all, I would like to clarify that we do not have like dual nationality like Filipinos. Okay. So once you embrace new nationality, you have to abandon Malaysian citizenship. So your question is like, do I have like sense of do I get the sense of how this next generation um, like less involved in the in Malaysia in terms of sense of belonging, right? So I would say that it depends on the first generation also, because as far as I know, the data that I have right now, because I talked to some of them, which still have the Malaysian citizenship, and also those who are not. So those who have this citizenship, regardless that they're born abroad, they still embrace Malaysian citizenship. They're more likely to be aware about Malaysian politic situation, of course, politics and economy and so on and so forth. But those who are born and also not embarrassed, sorry, um, having another nationality, they are less likely to have this sense of belonging in terms of politics and economy. But I would also want to highlight here, these people actually still have this sense of belonging on particularly on the culturals, the sense of culture, where because they cannot find this in their current country, but they still so they're looking for it from Malaysia. So they still have this attachment, but not in like politic and economy kind of way, but more on culture. So they're still like researching on like what kind of food Malaysian have, what kind of celebration Malaysian have, and then they also share this with other people abroad. So so I would say that they still have this sense of belonging, but not wholly like those who have this citizenship. And then what I mentioned about the first generation and second generation, the first generation who might also already abandon their citizenship, they actually it actually depends on how many times they travel back to Malaysia. So although they have like other nationality, their kids already not a Malaysian citizen, but it depends on how they're still connected to their family in Malaysia. So the networking is still there. If they still have this, and I asked this through my surveys, like how many times do you travel back to Malaysia, and how often you contacting your family or friends in Malaysia? It's actually giving out like result that those who are still contacting, still networking with those in Malaysia, they actually still have this sense of belonging and still letting their second generation to have this same kind of sense of belonging. So I hope that can answer your question.
Thank you. Sorry, but I have to leave because I'm running the next one at 6 o'clock. I hope you will join my group with two Indonesians and one Filipino. It will be very interesting. So sorry I have to leave you, but I'm very glad I was able to ask a question and get a great answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Okay. So let's move on then to Gabriel's question. For you have a questions for all the panelists, but perhaps we should start with your question to Vijaya.
Yes. Okay, I know what Gabriel points means by asking the question whether the mass media cover it or not. The short answer will be yes, they cover it. And maybe you will ask as well, I think, if it's on the media, in the mainstream media, then it's why it keeps on happening. Is that what you mean, Gabriel?
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I wanted to know if Indonesian people felt concerned with this possibility that they observed, that they can be hacked or harassed or terrored by the cyber troops you mentioned. And is it reported on the mass media, and what effect does it can have on public protest or mobilization and eventually elections?
Yeah. That's right. So I think that's a funny thing about Indonesia. Like yesterday night, we discussed with also Tanya Lee. First, I would like to answer briefly that there was a coverage about it, about the cyber terror in the mass media, and also research or survey conducted by my institution LPDIS, and also Indonesian Politic Indicator, and also other survey institutes found that actually public more than 50% of Indonesian citizens, they start to fear to express their opinion publicly. I think I also presented in my presentation. So yes, indeed, people feel concerned and feel scared. However, there is no protest about it. What I mean by no protest means that there was a protest from LPDIS, for instance, from our seminars to our seminars, or protest from Herlambang's organization, KIKA. Yeah? A lot of civil society protested. However, I will say that the movement is not big enough, strong enough that can push whoever that is who practiced the terror to stop what they did. So that's the situation. Instead, it discourages the civil society or citizen in general to express their opinions online because they fear that they got shot, they got the terror, the cyber terror. And besides, there's also we have a law on information and technology. I think Yuyun also mentioned briefly about it. Yeah, that that can send people to jail if you are considered as as violating the law. And sadly, some cases of the victims of this law is ordinary people that they actually did what is considered as legitimate in democracy. So they voice their critics, but what they got is sent to jails. That's the situation. And I think the puzzles here are, if this is too scary, I mean, the cyber terror is really oppressing the public, but why there's no protest? I guess it has something to do with too many things happening here, yeah. The pandemic, yeah, and the land grabbing in Kalimantan, for instance, yeah. Too many. What is it? Too many. Too many practice of rights grabbing by the power holders. Yeah, power holders can be anyone. That maybe I think that they got used to with this, and we don't have the sense of, again to make a collective actions, yeah, to make something, yeah, to work together. Hopefully, with the summer course that we will have together for 2 weeks, it will inspire people to move. Hopefully. Thank you.
Can I make just a very short comment about that? Just a reflection
yes.
about what you are talking about. It's a really deep contrast with the massive and collective mobilization against Ahok 4 years ago, where there was a common cause, unless of its relevancy, there was a common cause, and now we see that there are many fronts of potential protestation, but there is no kind of point of junction, you know, of gathering. It's quite fragmented.
Mm.
Am I
Yeah,
correct?
that's interesting. Well, maybe because it has nothing to do with religion. Yeah, I mean, when you got terror not because you're a religiosity, but it's because you're active. Yeah, you're being critical. But that's interesting. Yeah, because when the protest for that target, it can gather a lot of millions of people. Yeah, in on the street, but not for this one.
Yeah. Morals and politics have been disconnected. Totally.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. That's thank you for your comments.
Gabriel, you also had a question for Yuyun. Do you want to read it yourself?
Okay.
Maybe it's a good idea that Gabriel reads it out so everyone can hear it.
Yes.
Okay, the question, I don't remember precisely, but it was about the structural dimension of the measures taken by the different governments, because you mentioned an important number of measures, but which are quite punctual or specifics, and that are designed to fix very framed problems. But is there any vision that is more structural about why the health crisis occurs and what the governments can do to prevent it, and not only to cure it, to fix it? So is there any anticipation and social measures that are more structural? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And first, I would like to apologize. I mistakenly look at the hours, so it's contradicts because it's a CET and the other one is Seoul, and at actually the same time. So apologies, my mistake of looking at hours. But I'm back here. So my research was focusing really about the relations between civil society and the state in the context of COVID-19 and pandemic, how it changed, what kind of relations that created by the pandemic, and what possibly can bring into a shape after the pandemic. So that's my focus really from this. So so the way I look at government policies rather in relation to the relations with civil society in general. So far, some policies that many individual ASEAN governments have created or initiated, mainly using the digital platform of addressing number of issues. But these initiative rather responses as a response to the need, not necessarily having, I'm not sure whether they have a thorough preparation for this, because COVID-19 has always been seen as unprecedented situation. So it is rather any initiative from government is to respond rather than having a proper so I should not say this. I should not say the proper, because I do not know whether they have a proper process of developing initiative. But the way I see it is more to respond the situation in the pandemic. But again, my interest is rather whatever government respond, how it create a different relationship between state and civil society. In relation to deforestation, number of webinars that I attended and discussed, usually mainly with organization from Kalimantan, they reported that the COVID-19 created a moment in which either companies or local government use public health crisis to lure them into something. So for instance, because we cannot meet, so can you sign the agreement online? But actually what many farmers or many people sign and the actual document is actually totally different. So, but by the end, people do not have any rights to the land. And many organizations in Kalimantan already reported this kind of cases, but no avail. There is no follow-up. So again, I have not, for this issue, I know there are a number of events, incidences on this, but at the point this situation create a different change between government and civil society during COVID-19 and follow after COVID-19. That is something that I have not been able to elaborate. But during COVID-19, as I presented earlier, the relations change. There are a number of compromises. There are a number of negotiation between civil society and the state, and also there are a number of closed, not closed relationship, but before COVID-19, there has been a number of good relations between state and civil society, but during COVID-19, it's rather restricted and limited. To what extent it is going to be happen after pandemic, I still do not know, but it seems like civil society, given the character of being, civil society's character, I think in Southeast Asia, they will not accept what it is for them. They will always protest. They will always express the resistance. And perhaps this is something that I would like to see more. So my presentation presented number of events and points in which this kind of relations actually change. So my answer is not straightforward, but yeah, but what government's policy is not something that my my focus in this research, but rather how these policies create different relations between state and civil society.
Thank you very much, Yuyun. And also don't worry about being 1 hour late, because we're still watching the videos during the first hour. So you showed up at the right time. I also had a question for you, which has to do with the overall applicability of your analysis to Southeast Asia as a region. So do you think that it may apply to some country contexts more than to others? Or should we understand this as a really being one overall pattern for civil society trajectories in Southeast Asia during the pandemic? So to be a bit more specific, so the 7 different dynamics that you identify, they take place in overall very varying contexts between the countries that you have brought up. So which to me suggests that they may carry very different significance and different internal weights between them also. So for example, in Cambodia, many of the humanitarian civil society initiatives that you also mentioned come from groups with state links. So the expanded civil society involvement that you talk about, that might also to some extent contribute to the strengthening of state-sponsored civil society at the detriment of independent civil society. But this might not be the case for the other examples that you brought up. So I'm wondering, therefore, if these 7 points, if they could perhaps be read as a conceptual framework, where the task for different country contexts would be to establish to what extent these dynamics can be found and with what consequences in the different Southeast Asian countries.
I'm not sure about the applicability, but in terms of trends, I found it not only in Southeast Asia, it's also in Asia and the Pacific, of the restriction, street protest, challenging the narrative and this information about pandemic. So these are common in different parts of the world as responses of civil society to governments imposed restriction and limitation of freedom. I also see this community participation on organized relief efforts. It's not only in Southeast Asia. I attended different webinars in which civil society response to COVID-19. This kind of trend also be mentioned in different parts of the globe. So it seems like in terms of civil society responses to government policies and to the COVID-19, almost similar to other regions, but to what extent the responses from civil society changed their relationship with the state, that's something I do not know. I think each country has a different dynamic, each region has a different dynamic. In Southeast Asia alone, the regime, the political regime is rather different from one country to another. So that's actually create a different dynamic to see Southeast Asia compared with other regions. So for instance, like East Asia, which, well, it is not homogen, like China and South Korea is very different. But responses from civil society the same. But again, I do not know about the applicability of the pattern, but I know that number of responses from civil society are almost similar.
Right, thank you. We still have a little bit of time on our hands. So if you have more questions, please do write them in the chat box. But for now, we have a further question from Gabriel for Citi. Gabriel, do you want me to read it out? Do you want to ask it yourself? You're still muted.
Sorry, because we have a technical problem for panel 7, and I'm trying to fix it in real time.
Okay,
because
let me read out the question for you, and you stick to that.
My question. Okay,
yeah.
You want me to read the questions?
If you have the time.
Yeah. So my question was, is there any interaction between Bercy and Multi Alliance? I'm sorry, I'm very unfamiliar with the topic, and it sounds that they are like common trends. Do you have any information about that, Citi? Thank you so much.
Okay. I'm aware of the movement, but I'm not really well versed in it because it's quite new movement. But the root is, of course, the democracy movement. But then it tackles more on the because Bercy is more like whole kind of movement, but milk tea is more like digital kind of movement, and it is not really very known in Malaysia yet, because I would say it's most probably because of the timing of the because Malaysia is having like a very turbulence political issue because of the COVID, because we have like sudden change of government, so we kind of like having our own issue, and MIKTI movement is looking more on the issue in Myanmar, in Hong Kong. So I would say that because we are too occupied with other things in Malaysia, within Malaysia, so we are not really aware of this movement. But probably in the future, it will be one of our platform. But now, as what I can say, I've never seen any interaction between Bersih and Milk Tea yet, from my own knowledge. But I'm not sure if maybe it's already there, but I haven't like dig into it very very deep. So because I also see that we have this hashtag war on the internet, but most of them are actually organized by our own citizens, and we tackle only for certain issues. Not we are not organized by certain any specific movements like Bersih or MIKTI. It's mostly by our own citizens. So if you want to see through Facebook or Twitter, all the hashtags we have actually come up from our own citizens. So I would say for now, from what I know, I don't really see the connection yet, but probably it will be I would say it will be better known in the future when this COVID situation is reducing in Malaysia. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer. And just for your information, next year we plan to do the second Tashi conference with a try to make a crossroads, a dialogue between social movements and social researchers and concerned citizens. So hopefully we will have some representatives of Bersih or the MIKTI Alliance, and they will be able to talk us about possible influence and connections. Thank you so much, Siti.
Sure, thank you.
That sounds exciting. So let me ask you also, Siti, then, as someone, I'm not a Malaysia specialist, so I'd be really curious to hear just how you situate your own research findings in the sort of wider literature, the knowledge that we have really on Bersih. How do you think that your research adds to or even changes what is known about Bersih and global Bersih?
All right. I would say like just particularly on my study. So my study, because most of the study we have, it's mostly focusing on Bersih, but Bersih targeting on Malaysian in Malaysia. And as I mentioned earlier, Malaysian abroad only allowed to cast their vote just recently, like two general elections, previous elections. So that's why I would say that my research on this global Bersih would emphasize and also giving more awareness to Malaysian, not only in Malaysia but also abroad. And then it would shows that because we have like very unstable politics right now, so I would say that actually Malaysia's I would say Malaysians are very passionate citizens. We don't really protest much. We are kind of like using very soft approach to overcome the conflicts and stuff. But then through these studies, it shows that actually what most people think that this hard approach is, because they have like negative stigma on this like social movement. This is very hard approach, you shouldn't use this. I think my study would shows that actually that's not the case. If you know how to channel your voice, you doesn't and you actually don't necessarily using hard or violence way. So that's what I hope will be contributing, what my study will be contributing in this in this social movement study.
Excellent, thank you. Do we have a final question? You don't necessarily have to write in the chat box either. Is there anyone here who would like to ask what has to be the final question for any of our three presenters? Then you can just unmute yourself and ask your question. If not, I will, in that case, I will abuse my powers once more and perhaps ask a final question for Vijay. It's been very interesting to learn about this cyber terror, something that I wasn't so familiar with. And I think it also makes sense to think of these sort of digital authoritarian strategies as part of a wider ecosystem of digital authoritarianism. whole toolkit that authoritarians use digitally. So you have also, of course, as we hear more about, use of spread of disinformation, fake news on social media, and so on, perhaps sometimes news monopoly and different various tactics that authoritarians resort to. How do you think that this cyber terror that you have identified, is that a rather new tactic then, and how does it fit in with these other strategies used, do you think?
Yeah. If I understand your question correctly, it's about the trend, yeah.
How do you see cyber terror fitting in with other digital authoritarian strategies, such as, for example, disinformation, spread of fake news, and so on?
Okay. Yeah. No, thank you. So at the same time, currently I'm also doing research with colleagues from Amsterdam and Leiden, yeah, and also LPDGS and Drone Emprit Indonesia. One of the presenters before this is presenting also about it, and Pradipa is part of our team member. We're doing research about the cyber troops, and also what they do by manipulating public opinion. Yeah, in 5 cases in Indonesia, in the presidential election, in the revision of the law on the anti-corruption body, in the case of supporting omnibus law, supporting new normal, and also supporting the local election amid the pandemic. And what interesting, that's also a question for me myself, yeah, because in that research we found how there is an empirical evidences that in problematic government policies, you know, what I mean by problematic is this policy is actually not popular, not supported by the people. Like, you know, weakening the anti-corruption body by revising the law, while this body is trusted by the people, it's not popular. So there was a protest on it. There was also a protest on omnibus law. There was a protest on the local election, forcing the direct election, election of the local head amid the pandemic. But we found that together with that problematic policy, there was a tsunami of conversation. You know, tsunami means, you know, a sudden emergence of conversation about it that support that policy. You know, supporting that policy. For instance, in the case of KPK, yeah, in the anti-corruption body, and there was a tweet with using hashtag saying that the current the then officers of KPK were fundamentalists. They were Taliban. So we have to revise the anti-corruption body. We have to revise the law, and we have to impeach them. Those people. Well, those people are actually, you know, they did well in sending corruptors, yeah, to the jail. And in the case of New Normal, for instance, you know, they said that that it's viral on the media, or omnibus law, yeah, more clear, saying, you know, the hashtag is rakyat butuh kerja, means people needs job. So we need this omnibus law. Well, this omnibus law actually violating the rights of the workers, but the hashtag viral said that the people needs job. Sadly, the mainstream media also, you know, influenced by the propaganda, because it was viral. You know, millions of conversation was there. It's viral. It's a trending topic in Twitter, becomes trending topic, and then it's adopted. Yes, I can say that the disinformation, not just disinformation, but also public opinion manipulation online, went together with the cyber terrors to the activists. In a way, it makes the situation becomes worse. Yeah, when we talk about the digital rights in Indonesia, so we have at least 2, yeah, the cyber terrors towards the activists, and then the public opinion manipulation in the internet. And the third one, we also have the threats of the law on information technology. Yeah, this law will have sent some critical activists to jail as well, because they are they're voicing their criticism. And the fourth one was also internet blocking. So the government banned the internet, for instance, in Papua. Papua is the place where there is a long conflict because there's a exploitation of natural resources there, and there was a lot of conflicts. And there's also a movement to free the West Papua. And the government, instead of solving it with dialogue, they block the internet because the movement gained more popularity in the internet. Internet banning also happened in Jakarta back to 2019 after the election, when there was a protest to the election. And interestingly, even though the protest was in Jakarta, the government banned the WhatsApp of the whole Indonesia. So I can say that the cyber terror is just one symptoms, not just one story, but one practices of a digital authoritarian that becomes trend in Indonesia, because it also happens together with other practices in this country. It would be my answer.
Thank you very much, Vijay. We are running out of time. Gabriel has a short announcement to make before leaving.
Thank you so much, Astrid. I'm sorry, I have to leave to join the next session, and I wanted to underline that the panel 7 session has a new Zoom link that you can find in the chat box. So if you are interested to join after this current session, please. And if not, we will meet tomorrow. There is the roundtable on Myanmar, and other very interesting panel on political and mass violence, and another one about 1965 in Indonesia. Thank you so much, Astrid, and I am very sorry to leave before you. Have a good day, and Astrid, I will write you later. Thank you a million times.
Thank you. And I think it's really time for us to wrap up then. We extended by 30 minutes, which I'm glad that we did, but we have run out of time effectively. So thank you very much to all the presenters for this very interesting discussion. I think that your presentations, they have different implications for the original questions asked by the panel. So I think that this really highlights that these are empirical questions to be evaluated in any given context. So thank you again to all the presenters, to the participants for sharing your insights, and I hand over to Vijay.
Yeah, thank you so much, Astrid, for chairing the session. The discussion was very lively and very dynamic. And thank you for being generous to stay with us for 2 hours now already. So you prolong the session. And thank you everyone for coming. Yeah. Again, this is the panel 4B about political participation, and the continuation of panel 4A earlier, and the host is LPTIS and Diponegoro University. Before I close, I would like to announce once again, and there is Damar Juniarto here. Mas Amang, welcome. This is the event that we will hold together between SafeNet as well as Authori and KC. Yeah, it will be held next 22 August to 4th of September, and there was a summer course for 2 weeks entitled Social Media Activism, Digital Resilience, and Resistance to Democratic Creation. So for everyone who wish to join, please join. Astrid, perhaps you would like to share this to your students. We would be very welcome too.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I think we will end the session here. Mas Iqbal,